ladies. We are sitting down today with Rachel. And when we have another podcast host come on as a guest, that is always a special day. It's like when you're at school and it's someone's birthday and their mom brings in cupcakes. Like, I feel like that's today. And the content that she's going to share with us, y'all, you have been emailing in and asking us to talk about fostering and infertility and all of that that goes into it, the journey for the mother, the journey for the partner, the surrounding family. And as a friend circle and a community, there are some things we can do better that we might unintentionally be doing now. And there's some ways we can be a good support. So, Rachel, I am so happy to have you on today and to hear your story.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. Yeah, I'm here for all of the above. So yeah, let's get into it.
When we were first chatting, you talked about career dating, and it made me just big belly laugh. What is career dating?
Yeah, when I decided that acting wasn't for me anymore, I moved to LA from New York City where I had spent 10 years doing acting. And then I moved out to LA and I couldn't get arrested, as they say. And I was working 3 jobs and I was just like trying to put food on the table, going to auditions, like doing the whole thing, and it wasn't happening. And my new boyfriend, who ended up becoming my husband, just noticed. He was like, you seem kind of miserable doing this career. And I was like a little defensive. I was like, well, I mean, yeah, it's really hard and all this stuff. And he's like, you don't have to do it if you don't like it anymore. Like, why don't you do something else? And I was like, I had never thought about that because my whole life I had been gearing up. I was going to be a performer and that was it. And so I decided to go on this thing I termed career dating. I am going to just try out this and try out that. And I actually started making phone calls to like people's like dads who, like what my one friend growing up, her dad was a guidance counselor. And I called him and I was like, what's it like to be a guidance counselor? Maybe I could do that. And he was like, you don't want to do that. It's so boring. He's like, all you do is write college applications, like letters for college applications. And maybe you want to do something else. I had thought about being like a radio DJ. I called like a DJ that I knew, and the DJ was like, it sucks. Like, you can't play what you want anymore. Excuse my language if sucks is inappropriate. He was like, you really can't play what you want. It's like not really that great and everything. And I was like, okay. So I just started going around. I ended up getting a job at this place called VMS. It was a news organization where we would gather clips for PR companies and sell it back to them that they had like placed basically on the news, which first of all, I had never realized that everything essentially that's not like a natural disaster or something like that is kind of placed in the news savvily. And so, yeah, so I did that for a while. And then I was like, this really isn't it. I almost went back to school to be a teacher 3 times. And then I started doing, I was still kind of interested in the DJ thing. And I had been doing music on the side with my husband. I'm a singer, he's a drummer. And so I said, maybe I should just start my own radio show and then we can play our own music. So I did that and I found this little crazy old place in LA that was an old radio station. And I started doing this show just to play my music. And then I realized one day I was leaving the studio and I was like, this, this feeling, this is what I want. This is what I want all the time. This is the feeling I want. How can I get this feeling? And I had already looked into being a DJ. People were saying not to do it, this and that and everything. And then this little bell went off in my head. What about voiceover? People were always asking me when I lived in New York City, they would always ask me, like, can you do this voiceover for my independent film? Or, my the place I'm working needs like their phone lines done. Would you do the phone line? Like all this stuff. And so that it really culminated this kind of idea of just kind of trying things out and seeing what would happen really brought me in a funny way, brought me back to an original love of mine, but it helped me to find a new avenue that I hadn't thought about before. And then that became like all of a sudden it was like I had become a doctor. Like I was able to like finally when I got into voiceover, I trained for a year And then I put myself out there and I started working immediately. And it launched this whole new career for me of voiceovers for everything from commercials, web videos to narrating audiobooks, and eventually led me down the road to my podcast, which again was like coming full circle of like, I know how to do this. I used to have a radio show. Like, I can podcast. Sure. Why not?
Gosh, so the radios, you did not, or I didn't catch the radio show when we spoke first. Now, how does one go about asking for a friend? How does one go about just getting on the radio?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. It was called what I can't remember what the call name. It might have been KLAS, I think. And it was this old radio station that did this as a sort of a public service. Like if you think of public television that you sometimes see, it was kind of like that, but for radio. So you could rent out the space. So I had to pay for it. It wasn't very expensive though. It was pretty cheap, and I would rent out the space and I would do my own show and you could do whatever you wanted. And you were using all the old equipment, which was like crazy and really interesting. But then it would also broadcast online. And this is going back. I mean, this is in the early 2000s. So I had this online show, but of course, probably nobody was listening to it because nobody knew that that wasn't like on anybody's radar or whatever. But it was really fun. And I found that I really, really enjoyed doing that. And then it actually got turned into a TV show for a minute, also in LA. They were looking for, I saw this ad after I'd been doing my show for about a year that they were looking for TV programs. And I was like, ooh, what if we made it into like a TV show? And so I auditioned for it, got in, and did about 6 shows. And then the producer that hired me, who brought me on, got fired, and along with their getting fired, they fired all of the shows. And that was my very short lived career in television. Again, who knows if anyone ever saw it, but it was fun.
And you hit on a thread that we've been talking about a lot this season on the podcast, and trusting your intuition and knowing, being able to give yourself permission to know and acknowledge that feeling of, I want to feel like this all the time. I don't normally feel like this when I get up to go to my accounting job, but I feel this when I get up and volunteer at a daycare or whatever, because I think that we don't give ourselves permission to acknowledge that voice because that's woo woo and cray cray. And we're already on this trajectory. To do the amount of tack turns that you did takes a lot of bravery, just personally, but also socially. So I
Hmm.
love that you talk about that, and that how they can build into finally culminating into what you ultimately was your joy.
I know. It is. It's such a funny thing. I remember during that time, really, I was getting into a lot of like spiritual teachings and manifestation and everything. And I remember them saying, like, you don't have to know exactly what it is. What you want to concentrate is the feeling. You just want to concentrate on the feeling that you want, and the universe will start to align itself to what you want. So, believe it or not, I did practice some of that, and it led me in the most roundabout way. It's funny, it's just kind of like, sometimes it always comes when you least expect it. Like that day, I wasn't thinking about it, I wasn't trying to get anywhere. It just was like a light bulb that came up for me. And sort of like love. I feel like that happens with love a lot of times. It's like when you least expect it is when it ends up happening. Not when you're out there like pounding the pavement trying to find it.
3 days before Valentine's Day, when you're trying to get
Yeah,
somebody on the
get that
hug, it's
date.
not going to work. Speaking of your husband and your life and your journey, I love that you tell the story about he when he acknowledged that you weren't happy and then gave you permission to do something else. And I think I remember you got to kind of return the favor with him
I did.
when
I
he did. So
really
tell us
did.
about that.
Yeah. We've been able to do that for each other throughout we've been married over 20 years now, which is amazing. It'll be 21 years in August. I know, crazy. Yeah, he was a musician when I met him, and he's a drummer and really good drummer and played with a whole bunch of different bands and was often on the road and had been playing with a pop singer, and it really wasn't his thing. He didn't love it. In fact, they always were telling him he was a rock guy, and they were always telling him he was, like, playing too loud and, like, they were doing, like, a series of morning shows, in New York City, and they were like, "Joe, just can you hit lighter? Can you hit lighter? Like, just hold," essentially, they were like, "Just hold the sticks." And he was
Make
like,
yourself less.
"Yeah." And he was just like he called me one morning, and he sounded miserable. And I was like this was where we'd been together for a while now, like, maybe almost a year, and he was saying, he goes, "I don't know what it is. I'm just so miserable. Like, this doesn't feel good." And I was like, "I don't understand, honey. You're living your dream. Like, you're on Good Morning America, and you're," and he goes, "This isn't my dream." And I was like, "Okay, like, what's your dream?" And he's like, "Well, I wanted to be in, like a band, like, original band with my music, and I want that's my dream." He's like, "This is not my dream." And I was like, "Well, if it's not your dream, then you gotta do something else. Like, you gotta start looking for something else because there's no way you should feel so miserable doing something like this." And so he was the guy in his band that always designed the flyers. He always had a passion for design and art and, tech as well. He's really good at, like, computers and stuff. And so when we started thinking and throwing out ideas for him because he was like we were getting married at that point, and he didn't wanna be on the road all the time. He didn't wanna be away from me and playing music he wasn't particularly interested in. So, I was like, "Well, what else could you see yourself doing?" And he's like, "You know, I love design." And I was like, "Okay, then let's go back to school, like, get back in school." He went to art center at night and got the education that he needed, and then he started web designing, and then that turned into again, like, it's so weird how life kind of orchestrates itself. He ended up falling into UX, which, if listeners don't know what that is, it's user experience. And so it's basically the way a piece of software or website functions, and it's so perfect for him. He loves it. He loves everything about it. He's really good at it. It marries science, design, data, like all of these things that he really loves, and he's had a really great career with it. It's been amazing. So,
That. It's like,
yeah.
when you're in 4th grade and they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, I feel like there's so much pressure to pick something.
Yeah.
And then it can feel awkward deviating from that. And so, in 4th grade, he's not going to walk up with his pocket protector and be like, I'm going to do UX.
Right.
Like that's just not gonna but I love your love story in so many ways, like that particular part of it where you both really acknowledged what the other one needed and gave
Mhm.
that to them. And then also in your infertility journey you were
Mhm.
very supportive of each other.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we went along like that. So both of us had sort of a career change once we got married and we both started, doing these new careers, and we were very very into that. We were into building because we had spent our whole 20s and early 30s like kind of just not building anything for the future. We were living in the moment, and that was great, but then suddenly we were like we want to build something together. And so we were building and building and building and having fun and doing all of the things. And then, it got to be I was starting to look at 40, like I was getting in my late 30s, and I was like, if we want to have kids, we should probably like start thinking about that. And so we kind of like we went back and forth, and he didn't particularly even feel like he needed to have kids. He was kind of like, I don't know, I'm happy right now. I'm happy the way that we are, and I was like, I am too. But when I would look ahead, I always just felt like it would be lonely in the future. Like, yeah, it's okay right now. And it might even be okay in 10 years. But when I imagine us older with no children and like, what are the holidays like? And we're just alone. And then God forbid something happens to one of us. Like, all of those things just made me feel like, yeah, I know I won't regret having kids, but I think I might regret not having kids. So we were like, okay, and started doing it, and nothing happened. And after a couple of years, because we were really like, yeah, I don't want to get crazy about it. And I just want to take it easy and, let it happen naturally. And then it didn't. And so then, yeah, we started going into the fertility clinic and trying to figure out what was going on. And it was like unexplained infertility, which is like a ridiculous diagnosis that means kind of nothing. And yeah, we ended up doing 2 rounds of IVF. Both of those were unsuccessful. And then we were just in a mountain of debt. But through that whole thing, we had each other and we knew we had each other. And we really were the light for the other person when one of us was just really down and depressed and in the dumps. And I think I said this to you before. A lot of couples, for a lot of couples, this tears them apart. It's just really a lot of stress and a lot to handle, just years of it. But for Joe and I, it really brought us closer together, if that is sounds crazy, but it did. And we've been so blessed to have each other through that, and eventually ended up deciding on adoption. And then that was a whole new road to traverse. And how are we going to get there? And we were in so much debt from the failed IVFs that we decided to pursue fostering, and hope that that would turn into adoption. And again, like you're saying, with the universe, I really worked consciously to try to attract the child that was meant to join our forever family, because we had been through so much heartbreak already. I didn't want to, if at all possible, I was just, I just pray that we can connect with the child that is meant to join our forever family, and do that. And that is what happened twice.
I love how you talk about it. And with fostering, kind of give us an idea if someone's thinking about fostering.
Hmm.
How did your kiddos come into your life? The phone ring?
Yeah.
Like what happens?
Yeah. Let me give a little bit of background in case listeners don't have much background. So, the foster care system exists to keep children safe if there is a threat in their living situation and they cannot be with their biological family anymore. They will remove them, and then they have to find foster parents. So, the first thing to know about fostering to adopt is there's really no such thing. It's really all fostering until it's an adoption case. Now, there are some children that have already had the parental rights terminated. So, in that case, the child is available to adopt, but there's still a process and a procedure that you have to go through in order to make that happen. Joe and I had decided that we were really wanted to get a younger child. And that was after a lot of research and discussion and talk, and knowing that a child who's been in the system longer will have more trauma. And it's sad, but that is the truth. And so we're really hoping for, you basically tell them when you're getting in the process of getting certified, which is it's a very long process, and they do everything from FBI live scan to what's called a home study, home inspection to make sure your house is safe and all of this. They also ask you what your preferences are in terms of a child, because they don't want to match you with a child that you aren't either prepared to take care of or don't want to for whatever reason. So one of the things they asked was the age, and we said 0 to 4. So we were signed up for 0 to 4, but we had no idea. I mean, that's a big span of time there, 0 to 4. So we hadn't gotten any kind of materials or anything because we didn't know what the child was, we just didn't know. And so when we got the call, the way that they did it in our agency, we went through an agency that certified us instead of going directly through the county. There's two, you can do either one. It was recommended to us in LA because it's a big county. The social workers are very taxed, that it's a good idea to go through an agency so that you can get personalized and individual help and attention. And I'm glad we did that. So, yeah, we signed up for it. We went through the whole process, waiting and waiting, had several calls that weren't the right fit for, either I was sick, was just going out of town, I just a whole bunch of things that didn't feel quite right. And then we finally got the call for my daughter, and they designate one person to take the phone call, and you're not supposed to call, the other partner, like, the one person has to make the decision. So, my husband and I agreed that would be me, but I felt really like I was very stressed by the idea of, like, especially because I really wanted this child to be the child that joined our forever family, that I was really had been stressed. And so I went to a healer. She was like a channeler that my chiropractor recommended. And I was like, okay. She was like, you should go see Natalie. And I was like, okay, like I'll go see Natalie. And Natalie had told me when you get the phone call, put your hand over your heart and close your eyes. And if it's a yes, say yes. If it's not a yes, don't say yes. So a whole bunch of times I got this phone call, like 4 or 5 times, hand over my heart, close my eyes. I'm not feeling a yes, said no. And they assured us that you wouldn't go to the back of the line, but they have to call the next person. So they call this one day. I'm going to an audition actually for a voiceover thing. I pull over and they start telling me about, they tell you like the littlest information, like what they know. We have a baby girl, she was born in Santa Monica, blah, blah, blah. And I'm putting my hand over my heart, my eyes are closed. And I'm like, it's a yes. Like, I think it's a yes. I think it's a yes. I was like, "Can I call my husband? Please, let me just call him. I'll be like 3 minutes." The guy was like, you're not supposed to, but okay, call him." So I call him. He was new at this job. He would never have normally answered the phone. He happened to answer on the first ring. I start telling him about the baby, and he's like, "Yes, it's a yes." And I was like, "It is, right?" And he was like, "Yes, it's a yes." So I say yes. We're having a baby. Oh my God. Go, like, what are we gonna do? We have to go to Target, we have to get, like, a car seat, like, all of this stuff, and then he calls back, the social worker, and is like, "I'm so sorry, but this baby actually is medically fragile, and you are not a medically fragile household, so we are sorry, but you actually can't have this baby." So I was like, "Okay, I really thought this was the one." So that was a Friday. Whole weekend passes. Monday comes rolling around. I get a phone call from the social worker again. And the social worker's like, "You know that baby that I called you about on Friday?" And I was like, "Yes." "Well, she was reassessed over the weekend and she's actually not medically fragile. You can have her if you're still available." And I was like, "Oh my God, yes." So I called Joe. Joe was like, "Yes." So all of a sudden we just get into motion and the wheels start turning. And I mean, I could go on and on. There's more and more to the story, but that was essentially how it all started. And so by the next day, we had brought home a 3.5-week-old baby who had just had open heart surgery and, was amazing. And that was her. And she never left. We were the only parents she ever knew. So yeah.
And I love when we were talking at the beginning, kind of about your, I don't want to say awakening, but
Hmm.
when you just heard your body say, "Girl, get it together. Like, if we're going to do this, we need to do this." And how there are so few things in our life that are age restricted. You
Yes.
you could wake up tomorrow and decide you wanna learn how to needlepoint or become a pilot or, whatever you wanna do with your life. But you can't just, in many instances, wake up at any age and decide to start a family and to go even starting an adoption process. So I
Yeah.
love that you talked about that difference because it has come into my mind a couple times as I've been kinda going through stuff and talking with other folks that, wow, this decision can't be delayed. If
It's
you wanna do
true.
this, you get one opportunity, well, there is a point where it is at the end. So I love that you kinda had that insight and shared that.
Yeah, it's really true, and that for me was the first thing really that ever was like that for me, and it was also the first thing that, like, I just couldn't make happen. Like, I couldn't make it happen. I did everything right, I did all the things, like, ate the right stuff, didn't eat the wrong stuff, stopped drinking, stopped doing everything, took my temperature, did all the everything, and it was just the one thing that, like, I couldn't make it happen. So it was a big learning lesson for me. I think it was an important step in my evolution as a human, learning to surrender, learning that there's a power bigger than me that can see way beyond where I can see. And knowing that, if there is a will, there is a way, but it's not necessarily the way that you think it is. And I think it's like that with anything. I think it's like that with career. I think it's, that surrender to what you think is so important in a way because once you let go, then you're open to receive the gifts that you didn't even know were there for you.
So true. And I love that you kind of segue that in talking about gifts. That was something that I wanted to touch on while we chatted. So you get this 3.5 week old baby girl just
Mhm.
out of the sky.
Yep.
What does she come with? A supply kit? Kind of how does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question too. No, I mean, she came with a little garbage bag. The garbage bag thing is true. She came with a garbage bag full of clothes that had been at the hospital that they sort of just were like threw a bunch of random clothes, a couple of blankets, and we're like, okay, this is what we have to just like donate. And the little sign her crib that said Isabella. We still have that. It was just like a little cardboard, sign with her name, but we kept that. But that she didn't come with anything. So it's like you have to like just get into gear. And like I said, I went to Babies R Us, and I don't even know if that's still around, but it was at the time, and I just was like, "What do I need? Like, I'm bringing home a baby, like, well, I know I need a car seat, and, like, just give me the safest one." Like, I hadn't done, like, any of the research or, any of that kinda stuff, so it's very, like and I think, some people might have been a little more prepared than me, but I was also managing and navigating, like, a very, very successful active career, as was my husband, and so it was kind of like, "Okay, I'm just gonna react to this in the moment, we'll make it happen," and luckily, we're both really flexible people, so I think that might not be okay for everyone, but, I've been a performer my whole life, I've had to adjust on the fly, I've had to make do with whatever, and so I think that that actually kind of served me in that process.
So I like how you kind of shared that you didn't know if you were getting a boy or a girl, 0 to 4. And so unless you're just going to have just this overwhelming inventory
Yeah,
of things, there really is no way, even if you were not working, you had all day long every day to do this. What
right.
would you go about getting? It's just
I
it's
know.
impossible. And so that was kind of one thing that I wanted to chat with you too. Is that the concept of baby showers. That comes
Mhm.
up a lot in our social circles, and I think that we don't always know how to handle that. So kind of walk me through your process. Did you have a baby shower? Kind of
Yeah,
how can we be supportive?
I love this question. Because it was a really big thing for me. My girlfriends wanted to throw us a baby shower really bad, and I wouldn't let them. Like, I just couldn't. I was like, I can't have a big baby shower and then have the child taken away, and then I'm left with, like, all this stuff, and, like, I just felt like I couldn't do that, and I felt like, I don't know, like, you can throw one for me when the adoption happens. Now that I have this experience behind me, I see it a little bit differently. It's funny. I see it now as like, well, if people wanna throw you a baby shower and you do have a brand new baby and you do need some stuff, and also, it's not even for you, it's for the baby. So, like, let people throw you a baby shower and, enjoy that. And then if the baby does move on, then that stuff will move on with the child, which I didn't even think about or know. And yeah, so it's funny how my thinking on that has changed. But I think you have to do what the person feels in the moment. So, like, at the moment, I was very strong. I was like, "Absolutely not. I can't do it." And so my friends were like, "Okay, that's fine." And they did end up throwing a really beautiful party for us 2.5 years later when we adopted.
I love it. And I love how you kind of share just your journey of coming into the mom group. That when you reached out to your local mom community, you were
Yeah.
just met with overwhelming support. And I loved that story.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I'll share that. It was my first window into how moms are truly the superheroes of the world, and I would bet my money every time on a mom now. Like, I would just I want moms in office. I mean, they're just so ready for anything, and they'll help out where they can. What happened was my girlfriend, she was one of my best friends, is a violin player, and she was on a ship in the middle of some ocean when she found out. She had known that we were doing foster, that we had been signed up. And so when I texted her, I was like, "Oh my god, it's happening." She got on her mommy Facebook group And she was like, "My friend is bringing home a baby tomorrow and she has nothing. Can you help?" And literally, it was like the minivan cavalry just started showing up at my house and dropping off like amazing blankets and bedding and, cribs and playthings, and it was just unbelievable. It was the power of community, the power of that shared bond of being a mom and other moms just rallying together, and the power of social media, which at the time, again, this was 2016, so it just really resonated with me like, wow, that was wild. Like, it could happen so fast like that. I'm still so grateful for all of those women.
I love it, and I can see after having chatted with you now how that would have felt not as, I don't wanna say gluttonous, is not the right word, but I can understand not wanting to have a baby shower, and that people go out and buy all this stuff for her, but for you, on your behalf, and then something goes sideways. I can see 100%, and that's why I wanted us to kinda talk about it because I can see how I would probably have those same feelings.
Yeah.
Because we wanna be polite. We wanna be that friend that people wanna stay friends with that doesn't, "Oh, well, no, don't answer her call because she's probably trying to adopt another baby, is gonna wanna sh" I can totally see that, but having people
Yes.
bring stuff that they are no longer using and upcycling
Yeah,
feels completely different.
it does. It
I
does.
can totally see. So with that, as you've gone through your journey, what are things that your friends or community have said that have been really hurtful that they maybe didn't realize was hurtful when they said it?
Yeah. There's a lot of othering that goes on without people knowing. For instance, especially when you have a young, like a baby, all of the women at the playground or at the birthday party, they're all talking about their births. And so that was a conversation I could not participate in at all because I didn't give birth. So not only could I not talk about it from my own standpoint and experience of like the physical act of giving birth, but also just the entire anything about that, anything about something being hereditary, like, anything about even the details, because I didn't really have details. I didn't know what time until 2.5 years later. I didn't know what time of day my child was born. And I found that out after the adoption when I finally got her full files and found out that she was born in the middle of the night. And I didn't know that, and it was like a little piece of the puzzle, like, oh, of course she was. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah. But so all of those kind of things are tough. The conversation about whose eyes she has,
Mhm.
all of that stuff can be tough. And, it's nobody's fault though. It's nobody's fault. It's like that's just a part of it, and I've learned to be okay with it at this point. But as a new mom who was really out of my element anyway, and then this extra layer, it was hard. It was just, I felt othered a lot in those conversations. Yeah.
Love that word you put on it, othering, because I think that a lot of our listeners are in a othering type situation. Maybe they're raising a niece nephew for a sibling that might be deployed, or they have, adopted like you, step parent situation. There are so many because we don't talk about it. It
Yeah.
doesn't. We don't realize how prevalent it is.
Yeah.
The othering setup. And I think that as a society, we all kind of follow those same talk tracks, like you were just saying. And it
Mhm.
can be really uncomfortable, not only for the one othering, but for the child, because now
Mhm.
they feel like the storyless person. Everyone else has a story, and I'm
Right.
not worthy of a story. So I could
Right.
see how that could really, so I love that you put that word on it. And
Mm.
so we can just kind of become more mindful of those that are othering and
Yeah.
meeting them where they are in their journey
Right.
versus assuming
Right.
they've walked it step by step from the beginning.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then another thing I would offer, just in terms of what you can offer to someone who might be going through this, is I can't underestimate, like, I can't tell you how meaningful it was to me the two times that a woman offered to come over and just brought me a Starbucks and was like, "You go take a shower. Like, go take a shower. I've got this. Like, I've got the baby." Like, my God. you know, because we didn't have any family out there. We had no family that could help us. We had no babysitters because we weren't in that world at all. And yeah, just two women in particular, both moms, who right away were just like, I'm coming over. What kind of coffee do you like? And like, I've got this. You go just do whatever you need to go lay down, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting on every level. And just because you didn't birth the child, it doesn't mean that you're not completely exhausted all the time.
That they still cry the same number of times, whether
Yeah.
whether you birthed them yourself or not. And I
Yeah.
love that you shared that story because we did a big segment on grief and
Hmm.
how a lot of times we don't know what to say to people when they're grieving. And
Hmm.
we say, "Let me know if you need anything."
Right.
And it's like, gosh, when I'm going through, grieving my parent or my spouse or, anything, any grief, is there a menu of things I can ask for? Like, what do I
Right.
get? And so I love that you gave that example because it helps us be prepared. Here's what we're going in with. We're not just asking, what kind of coffee do you want? We're
Yeah.
not saying,
Yeah.
let me know if you need anything. It's like, girl, I'm here. Open the door. Like, I
Yes.
love that.
And that is huge because it's also like it's overwhelming to even when you get that question, it's like, what do I need? Like, God, like I need everything right now. I can't even think. So I do think it's good to be specific, to offer a meal, like we had one family that just bought us pizza one night. It was just like, I'm buying you guys pizza. Let me know what you want. That was great. And then if you're thinking about gifts too, one thing that was really wonderful, and actually she was one of the ones who brought over coffee and held the baby, also gave us as a gift a year of a membership at the zoo. And that was such a beautiful gift. And,
Okay.
you don't have to do if you don't have that kind of money, you don't have to do that. But it was such a thoughtful and wonderful gift because it actually provided me with like, okay, I have this membership. Like when I'm going crazy and can't think of like what to do with the kid, like, well, we can go to the zoo. We have this for a year. So I would highly recommend those kind of experiential gifts too can be really wonderful.
And that also too just gets you out of that environment. Sometimes just
Yes,
breaking the environment can be so helpful. I
absolutely.
I love that. And so, Rachel, if folks are listening and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I wanna follow her online. I wanna hear her podcast, check her books out," where can we find you?
Well, I would love that from foster, the number two, forever.com. And you can find the podcast there. Sign up for the mailing list. I do have some books and new stuff coming out, and I would love to see or hear from any of you guys over there. Thank you.
I love it, and we'll drop it all in the show notes, so don't panic with your lipstick trying to write it all down. We'll put it in the show notes for y'all. And with that, kinda what do you wanna leave our listeners with today, Rachel?
Yeah, I want to say that whatever it is that you truly desire in your heart, like it can happen. It just won't necessarily happen the way that you think it should. And so to not give up, I mean, we went through over a decade of struggling to start our family. A decade long of that. Like, what a drag that was, and a emotional burden it was, but it was worth it. And we're living our dream now because we decided to stick it out when it got hard instead of just saying, forget it. It's too hard. I'm not going to do it. And that's not to say that like sometimes giving up on something can be the right thing to do. I mean, it can be like a gift to yourself to be able to do that. But just know that whatever you want, like y- open yourself up to the universe, put it out there, and it may come to you in a way that you least expect it.
How you said that. You said, "Where there's a will, there's a way. It just may be a different way." And
Exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing your time and your vulnerability and your journey with us. I love every episode, but I always say this was my favorite. I love all of it, and I love that you were just so vulnerable about the journey, and also too kind of helped us increase our knowledge base of how to be a better supporter to our friends and community when they're going through something. So I
I
thank you.
appreciate that. I can't tell you, I appreciate those questions, and I'm so happy to talk to you. Thank you, and thank you for listening.